Hi, I'm back, and this time I have some goodies and some stuff to share with you as well. I want to show you some really cool techniques that you're probably unaware of, and this really goes out to those photographers who really want to get more involved with the painterly style of portrait photography. Now, this is actual paint, like it's not traditional paint, but you're actually painting. But I have discovered that this is probably the easiest way to transform your images into painted backgrounds. I specifically use this to paint my backgrounds. You don't have to paint your subject if you're not interested in it, but this is a fantastic, super easy technique. Now, I'm going to use all of the brushes that I'm going to use are available on my store. You have to have specific brushes that don't have a tool applied to them in order to use them with this particular Photoshop tool. Now, what tool am I talking about? I'm talking about the pattern stamp tool. Now, if you're part of my platform, you're probably already very familiar with this tool because I use it all the time in so many different ways. And as always, if you're interested in joining my platform, I actually have a Black Friday sale right now where you can join, and your first month will only be $18 US, which is 25 Canadian. Okay, let's get into it. So this is a studio portrait, and I built a set around it, but coming into it now, in order for me to use the pattern stamp tool, there's some things that I have to do in order to make it look the way that I want it to be. Okay, I'll give you a couple pointers. So for instance, if I were to try and paint this right area right here is going to look odd because it's just really bright. Okay, this door doesn't go all the way up, so that looks a little odd as well. I don't really want the suitcase because once I paint it, it's going to turn into a blob. We don't want any blobs. So what do? Okay, first thing that you want to do, as always with anything that I do, typically when I'm going to paint a background, is you're going to remove your subject. And we all know how to do that by now, I'm sure. If you want specific detailed instruction on how to successfully separate your subject from the background, again, I have that available on my platform. Okay, so once you do that, you're going to put your layers in between your background layer and your cutout subject layer. So I'm just going to really quickly show you what I've done here, and then I'll demo it and I'll show you how to paint it. Okay, so once I separated the two, I turned everything off above it, but this is the background here. So as you can see from this, what I did was I took the subject out, and I did that using the generative fill command here on Photoshop. And then I selected this portion of the canvas right here, and I used Command T, and I just pulled it over so that it covered that bright spot. And that's important because when you're creating these backgrounds, you really don't want to have the odd, even if it makes sense photographically, it's not going to make sense once it's painted. So you want to have everything pretty seamless in your background before you begin painting it. As well, you don't want any bright blobby spots because they're going to really remain bright and blobby. Okay, so then what I did, I'm going to turn this on. I took my lasso tool and I did a really rough selection of these plants, and I Command J'd it. Okay, and then once I did that, I started to create multiple layers of it. So you can see here that I just duplicated that Command J layer a few times, and it doesn't have to be perfect. That's the beauty of this. It can just be a rough cutout like that. But like I said to you before, these really bright areas here and here, they have to be toned down. So how do you do that? Well, all I did was I came in with another layer over top, and I just used a regular brush and I painted them away. I also used my clone tool so that I just added edging to it, and I covered it all up that way. Super quick and easy to do. And I also used my generative fill to come in here and just get rid of that whole bench and little suitcase and everything. Just circle it, put a period, hit enter and let it do it. You might have to do it 2 or 3 times to get it perfect. I painted the foreground that darker gray color, okay? And now this background is ready to be painted. And why did I add plants up here and over here and everything? Well, the door didn't go all the way up, so I had to find a way to cover it up to make it still look pretty, right? But this now, with this, is going to look so much better painted. So let's get started. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn off our subject again, okay? You can go ahead and merge all these layers, which I'll do. So just right click and merge them. Just like that. You still have your background, and that's your original background, just like that. Okay, but what we're going to do is make sure that we have that showing. We're going to go edit, define pattern, and you can call it whatever you want, and click OK. So now you've defined the pattern that you want to paint, the colors that you want to work with. And realistically, that's really all it's doing, is it's using all of the colors that is available on your screen right now. Okay, so we're going to come over here. We're going to long press our clone stamp tool, and we're going to choose pattern stamp tool. Make sure you have impressionist ticked up here in the toolbar, because otherwise you will not get this effect. Now we're going to drop down our patterns, and we're going to choose the latest pattern that we just created from this background, okay? And I typically have my opacity always at 100, guys, and I only work with my flow. And your flow is going to determine how much of the painterly effect that you want to affect on your image. So I'm going to go into my brushes now. So in my brushes, this is my pattern stamp tool brush set, okay? I have all kinds of different things here. I have flowers, I have just textured, abstract painterly like brushes that I use just for backgrounds. I use different ones for different reasons, okay? So let's start with just a general background, and then we can go over top after, maybe use some floral brushes, and you'll see how amazing this is. Okay, so my pattern 5 brush is really good for like painted textures, painted backgrounds, things like that. So we'll start with that, and I'm just going to reduce it down to about 25. And depending on the size of brush, all you have to do is come in and you can do little circles, you can go just little hand movements, and you can see right here how amazing this is. It really does turn your entire background into what looks like a painted background. Now keep in mind that all it's doing is it's just working with the colors that already exist within the image, which is why you have to set the image and the pattern that you want to work with. And I tend to do this as a base layer with every image that I paint, because I want to work with the colors that already exist in my image. Okay, so you can see that when you go heavy-handed over specific areas, it does indeed kind of make whatever the image is, like this flower pot here, really disappear. And that's why you want to work with different brushes for different areas, because you're not going to want to make everything disappear unless you do, right? So like this little stool that plant was sitting on, I'm going to make that disappear. Again, this is the door that was there. We're just looking for the colors. So something like that. I got to wait for my spinning ball of death to go away. And we'll just keep going. And I could go over top of my foliage if I wanted to right now. I'm just going to focus on the backdrop, the canvas in this picture right now, as well as these curtains. Okay, but for the curtains, I am going to drop my flow down to about 12. And I'll make my brush a little bit smaller too, because then when I start going in the direction of these curtains, it's going to maintain a bit of the structure of those curtains. So the larger your brush is, the less you're going to see the actual structure of the image underneath it. Like so. So now you can see that we've got some really cool looking paint strokes on the curtain, so it's not really taking away from the curtain looking like a curtain. It's just giving it that overall painterly effect. So the key to remember is that whatever changes you want to make to your image using a brush or using cutout foliage or whatever you're going to do, make sure that you define your pattern after you make all of those changes, because you're not going to see any of the imperfections that may have been created while you did that. So you can even see here that this is a little gray spot. Now once we turn on our subject, you're not going to see it, so am I really worried about it? No, not really. But you can make your brush smaller if you want to really come in here and define this edge of this curtain so that it still maintains a bit of structure. And then bigger again when you want to get a little more of that painterly look, and then smaller again to redefine that edge. Okay, and you can always go back over top and it will change your brush strokes. It's not going to keep it exactly the same. Every time you go over it, it's actually going to kind of change it a bit. Okay, so now that's that. All I've done is just the one brush. You know, it's super quick. It takes very little time to get these effects. Okay, so that's that. Now I'm going to change my brush and I'm going to come down to my flower brush. Now I've got a couple. I've got one with texture and one without texture. It just depends on what you're going to do with this. Now I tend to use Boris FX optics for a little bit of unique features, and so I like to use the ones with no texture for that. So now we are at about 12% flow, and I'm going to make my brush about the size of these leaves. This flower brush is going to take those colors and it's going to paint what's going to look like flowers instead of the leaves. Okay, so I typically will do, I always just play with it. And for these ones, I do little circles. But yeah, so you just keep doing this until they're all done. And then once it's all done, I'll show you the next step. Okay, how pretty is this? Seriously, like I'm telling you guys, like if you ever really wanted to get into painting in Photoshop, oh, I am just obsessed with this technique. I've pretty much abandoned almost all my other painting techniques except for painting portraits, like the human being. It's obviously different, but for backgrounds and creating your own backgrounds, nothing beats this tool. Okay, so now the next thing that I would do, we're just going to turn our subject back on and see how we're doing, is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to grab another brush. This one I'm going to use my pieces brush. Okay, now that I have my pieces brush, it's very little, but this is going to add what looks like actual bits and bobs of flowers. And I really love this one because it really does transform. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit so you can see just a little closer what I mean by the bits and bobs. They're going to be a little sharper, and I could actually go a bit smaller on this brush too. Now, I know it's kind of hard for you to see, but the special effect that I use in optics and Boris FX, it needs this brush for it to actually work the way that I want it to. So we're just going to add these little sharp pieces to our florals all the way down here too, and up into the top one. So something like this. And again, this takes 0 time. So if you're one of those people going, oh, I just don't have the time to do all this painting myself, guys, this takes no time. I'm telling you, 0 time, like a good maybe 10 minutes and you've painted an entire background. I just get really anal with how I want it to look. That's why I hand paint in with just a general soft brush all of the little pieces that kind of bug me and I know they're going to take away from the final image once it's done. So yeah, this is all I do. Come in like this. See how it adds those little kind of tiny petals to it. and it just adds that little bit of oomph. Now, you can always reduce your opacity of that, but if you're working on one layer like I just did, then you can't. So make sure there's no reason why you can't work on another layer. So after you do your base layer, add another layer, do that, and then you can reduce the opacity if you want to. Okay, now I'm going to show you another little thing that you can do, and this is kind of cool. I'll add a new layer. I'm going to go to just brushes now, and I'm going to go back to this bits and pieces brush, and now you can sample a color. Let's say we want to sample this color here, but we want it just a little bit lighter. Now you're going to pull your flow down to 20-ish, make your brush tiny, and now you can add some highlights, okay? Really show off that effect. It's just going to make those little bits and bobs stand out just a bit more. And you pick the color that you want to affect, and then you come in and you use it this way. And this is really helpful. You know, if you want a couple, a little bit more like this, then you're just adding in a little bit of detail into your painting. You don't have to get crazy with it, just add a little bit. And now, even if you go too heavy, you can always go and reduce the opacity of your whole group. Okay, so something like that, and now you can reduce that so that it's subtle, but it's still there. Do you see what I mean? Like, how easy was this? So easy, right? So we're going to turn our subject back on. We're not, again, caring very much about that kind of darkish blobby spot there, which does indeed bug me. Now, how do you want to make this all kind of blend together? This is what I like to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a layer underneath my paint layer, right? I'm just going to add another layer. I'm going to choose probably the color of her skirt in the dark, and I'm going to fill it with that color. That way, now I can actually reduce the opacity of my painted background, and it just kind of makes it a little more painterly and subtle, something like that. Okay, and that's basically it, guys. If I want to move my subject around, let's say I want her more over here, let's cover up that blank space there, then we might have to deal with this little piece right here. And what would you do? Well, I would just cut out that plant thing, add more of the plant right there, and then paint that back in. You can also paint more in here if you wanted to, but I just wanted to show you generally how this works and how it can be so incredibly fun to do. So next step, what would you do? Well, if you want to blend your subject with your painting background, then this is what you do. Go back to your edit, go back to define pattern, choose another one like this, go back to your pattern stamp tool, and you're going to choose the new pattern, which is the latest one that we just used. And you're going to choose a brush and you're going to start blending the two together. So to do this, I'm just going to go ahead and create a smart object out of my subject, and then I'm going to rasterize it like that. And then I'm going to create a layer above her, and I'm going to pick my brush. So, you know, I'm just going to choose one that is just a painter brush, not a floral or any other kind of brush like that, because all I'm going to do in here, I'm going to turn my flow down to about 20, is I'm going to come in and I'm going to start affecting the edges of my subject here. Okay, I'm just softening the edge, and this part right there, that's okay. You could always paint over it, because no matter what you're doing, you can just add a layer, paint over it where you want it to be, create another pattern out of that, and then keep going. So it's very flexible, very easy to use, and yeah, it's just so amazing. Okay, so I'm just kind of blending the two together like this, and this is going to create my transition so that it again maintains that very painterly look between the two, so that I don't have any weird edging. And the thing with this too is that, you know, when you're doing it this way, you don't really have to worry about your selection being oh so perfect, right? Because you know you're going to come in and you're just going to blend it together using a brush like so. Now you could go ahead and paint the entire skirt with this brush. That's an option, because why not? But there's so much that this tool is so good at doing and helping you create really fast and beautiful and simple paintings just with this one tool in Photoshop. Okay, and if you wanted to do something with the hair, then you can use a mixer brush and go over top. From my painting set, I have a really wonderful brush that I use for hair in my paintbrush set, and I do believe I've got another video over here about that, so check that one out. But right now I have my pattern stamp tool brushes on sale in my store. There will be a link in the description if you want to play, because I will tell you I struggled with finding any kind of brushes that I could use with this tool that didn't have tools applied to it. So most brushes are a paintbrush, a general paintbrush, or a mixer brush, or they're a smudge brush, but there's none with 0 tools applied. So I decided for my students in my platform that I'll go ahead and just create one, because I had a heck of a time finding one. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly finish this edit and I will be back. Okay, so here is the final edit, and honestly this only took me another probably 15 minutes from where I left you guys. I did some color toning, so you can see I added some of the same florals in the front, same piece that I used to cut out before, plopped that in there and just painted it and did some color grading, and that's pretty much it. I also added a texture to this portion here because I felt like it didn't have enough structure. Okay, so that is something that we are all loving on the platform, and I have probably about 50 or so courses up there now. So many. We've got, I think, over 500 people on the platform. So if you want to get in for super cheap, come and join us. I have showed you in this previous video how I use optics to make the florals that I make with the pattern stamp tool as a 3D kind of texturized painting. I decided not to do that with this one, but if you're interested in that, make sure you go check out this video. And I do want to mention that Boris FX Optics does have 25% off everything in their store. I will put a link below so you can go check them out. I wanted to show you some other images that I have made recently using Boris FX Optics, and it does take a little bit of work to figure it out. So I will be doing a YouTube video on that very shortly, because you need to know the power of this program. At first I was like, oh well, you know, it's okay for some stuff. No, it's really amazing. So I had to do a deep dive and learn all about it, but the masking, the luminosity masking, everything in it is just kind of amazing. So I do have a few sales up in my store. So if you come to my website, you're going to see this, and you're going to see my Black Friday sale. So you can actually click this link and it'll take you right to my platform if you aren't going there directly. And you can go on my website and you can see a lot of the fun images like this I used with Boris FX Optics, this one. And oh, I do have some new items up in my store I wanted to share with you guys. And I'm not sure how much you do, you know, kind of more ethereal, digital kind of work like that. But if you're interested in, let me see, where are they? My overlays and textures. So I have created a brand new wing set. So this is my wing set. It's on sale right now for $25 Canadian. So that's again about 18 bucks US. And these wings are all hand painted. So I do have other wings, but they're all AI generated. And I don't know about you guys, but I am kind of moving away from using a lot of AI stuff. I never really used it to create, you know, fake photographs, but I used it as an asset to use with my photography. For instance, here's a pair of painted wings that I made, but the background is from 2022 when I was making all kinds of beautiful backgrounds, but I never really just, put a prompt in and then said, here's a backdrop, please buy it. No, I actually artistically designed them, blended them, did a ton of work on them before I offered them. So here's another little set of wings. I wanted to show that they're not just for children, like you can use them creatively. I have a really cool set like this that I thought would be fun for people who like to do more character stuff or fantasy stuff. And it comes with the glow, which is kind of fun. And this one here, again, these are all hand painted. I drew them and then I painted them. So for those of you that are anti-AI, this is the set for you. And here's just a really cute little display of all of the wings that are included in that one. And again, if you're interested in my brushes, so I have so many brushes. I wanted to come in here and show you. These are my pattern stamp tool set. So this includes over 20 patterns as well as brushes. Now, if you don't know how to use the patterns, I showed you today how you can create a pattern out of your photograph, right? Well, you can also install these patterns and then you can use the patterns to paint over top. So for instance, if you wanted to create an image with florals, but you wanted the florals to be different colors, then that's where these all come in handy. So you can see here, these are some of the examples that I've done. Like this is part of a floral pattern that I used. And this is, again, one of the patterns provided in the set. So I would just really suggest you go in and check this out, because if you're into Photoshop painting as much as I am, then I think you'll really love these new tools. So until then, I will leave you, and I hope you have a great Thanksgiving if you're in the US. And the season coming ahead, which is Christmas, I have a whole bunch of really fun cards planned that I'm going to be teaching on the platform that you can actually print off, and you can paint or not paint them, and you can give them to all your friends and family as gifts. So until then, I will see you in the next video.